Hi guys, I am Mrs. M and today we are going to discuss on differences between prokaryotes and eukaryotes. So before continue the topic, let me ask you a question. Whenever you go to a grocery shop to buy the yogurt, have you ever checked the label on the yogurt container? What does that says? It says that contains active live culture. What does that mean? If you want to know the answer, then do watch the video completely. So we all know that all living organisms do contain structural and functional units called as cells. In the nature, we have seen different kinds of cells that are existed. Some of them are plant cells, some of them are animal cells, some of them are bacterial cells. Then how do we classify these cells into different groups? So broadly, all the cells, they fall under two categories, prokaryotic cells and eukaryotic cells. So what exactly these two kinds? Let's discuss that. So before going into details about these two types of cells, let's remember one thing, that all living cells do contain the genetic material in the form of DNA, and it controls all the activities of the cell. Then how to differentiate prokaryotic one to that of the eukaryotic one? This is based on a structure within the cell called nucleus. This particular nucleus, that is a membrane bound structure and enclosing the DNA or genetic material. If that particular nucleus is present, then you call that cell as eukaryotic one. And if the DNA is freely floating without having the nucleus, then you call that particular cell as prokaryotic one. Generally, we call this freely floating DNA as nucleoid. Do not get confused with the nucleoid term to that of the nucleus. Then if you see the examples, bacteria comes under this particular prokaryotic one, and for eukaryotic one, animal cells and plant cells, they come under this particular eukaryotic one. So what's the difference in regarding the term pro and eu? These are derived from Greek words. Eukaryote means, eu means true, karyon means nucleus. Presence of true nuclei, therefore the name has given like that. Prokaryotic, pro means before, karyon means nuclei. Since these cells do not have the nucleus, they are existed before the distinctive nucleus establishment, therefore the term is given as prokaryote. So now we know what are prokaryotes. Let's see what kind of organisms fall under this category. Prokaryotes are typically unicellular microorganisms that are generally smaller in size and simpler than that of the eukaryotic cells. Bacteria and archaea, they fall under this category. They belong to Monera kingdom. Some of the prokaryotes are so small, they are even difficult to see under best light microscopes. For example, Mycoplasma pneumoniae, bacteria that causes pneumonia, is only 0.2 micrometers. Despite of their simplicity, prokaryotes can grow very fast and reproduce and respond to environment very quickly compared to that of the eukaryotes. Most bacteria, they don't make their own food. That means they must rely on the other organisms to have their energy cycle to run. They may be parasitic or they may be decomposing the dead decay organic matter to obtain the energy. Just the term bacteria, the moment you hear, then don't think that they are all harmful bacteria. Most of the bacteria are useful bacteria that produces many useful products to us. So now let's move on to eukaryotic category. What kind of organisms fall under this one? These are mostly multicellular organisms, but there are some unicellular are also present, just like protists. These are generally larger in size, more complex, and highly specialized compared to that of the prokaryotic cells. Most of these cells contain membrane-bound structures within the cell, such as mitochondria, chloroplast, endoplasmic reticulum, etc., to perform different functions of the cell. Then what kind of organisms we can say for eukaryotic examples? Plants, animals, fungi, and protists comes under this category. So what are the similarities between the prokaryotes and eukaryotes? So if you see, this is eukaryotic one and this is prokaryotic one. Both of them, they contain cell membrane, and both of them, they have cytoplasm, the jelly-like structure inside the cell, and both of them, they have the ribosomes that are involved in protein synthesis, and both of them, they contain the genetic material, that is DNA. So let's move on to differences between pro and eukaryotic cells. Prokaryotic cell has no true nucleus, whereas eukaryotic one has membrane-bound true nucleus. Prokaryotes, DNA is freely floating inside the cell, whereas eukaryotes, DNA is enclosed within the nucleus. Then prokaryotes do not contain membrane-bound complex cell organelles such as mitochondria and chloroplast and endoplasmic reticulum, whereas eukaryotic cells, they contain these structures. Then prokaryotes, mostly they contain cell wall, and eukaryotic cells, if it is an animal cell, it is absent. If it is plant cell and some protists, cell wall is present. Then prokaryotic cells, they contain flagella used for locomotion, whereas eukaryotic cells, mostly it is absent, but it may be present in some protists and sperm cells. Prokaryotic cells are typically unicellular, whereas eukaryotic cells are mostly multicellular, but they may be unicellular, such as protists. Prokaryotic cells contain plasmids, that is circular DNA material, which is extra compared to that of its genome, whereas eukaryotic cells do not contain plasmids. Okay guys, now it's time to answer the quiz question. When you observe the yogurt container label that says contain active live culture, that means there are living bacteria in that yogurt, then you must be worried now that you are eating the living organisms, and no worries, these are not the harmful bacteria that cause you to get sick. In fact, these are called probiotic cultures that are useful to us, and they can turn the plain old milk into yummy yogurt treat. They produce lactic acid that coagulates the milk proteins, by doing that making that milk into thick yogurt. The bacteria that is used in this process are mainly of Lactobacillus bulgaris and Streptococcus thermophilus. So